New on Curiosity Stream.
I'm James Burke. I'm going to take you on a journey through time.
James Burke's visionary series returns, reimagined for our time.
Now, this is all uncharted territory.
The Washington Post hails Burke as one of the most intriguing minds in the Western world. The New York Times raves he careens from one great moment in history to another.
Where do we want to go from here?
Experience all new connections.
So what's the next connection?
With monthly, annual, and bundled plans, find the one that works for you at curiositystream.com.
Maybe some of you thought, okay, it probably just originated somewhere on some alley in New Orleans, or I'm just uneducated in that respect, which is both are not true. One is true. I didn't know anything about voodoo. My name is Richard Dix, and this is How Did That Happen? A podcast where I look at everyday things or events and try to figure out how they came to be. Every week I will research one topic, and by the end of the episode, I hope to truly have the answer to the question, how did that happen? All right, welcome back to another episode of How Did That Happen? HDTH. This is episode 51. We're going to be covering voodoo. I did not know that much about voodoo before I went into this. I'd say not much. I didn't know anything. We'll keep it 100 here. I found out that it's a religion. There's a lot going on there, and I will share all that with you. But before we get into it, hope you guys are all heading over to hdthappen.com for all the episode extras. After every episode, there will always be a written version of the show, complete with pictures and videos to go for anybody who wants to know a little more or can't quite understand what I'm saying. I understand that as well. There's also a blog on there where I share all my thoughts to the 3 people who will listen to it. Let's see, before we get too deep, as I always say, what am I watching? I just recently watched that Jonah Hill documentary on Netflix. I believe it's called Stutz. Yeah, it's an awesome documentary. It really is. It's about therapy and trying to use tools to help you get through different situations in life, which I think is one of the more important parts of therapy when people don't think about it or try to figure out how they can use it in their daily life. It's more than just getting getting something off your chest or talking to somebody. It's about trying to figure out how to use what's around you to get through all the issues that you face throughout daily life. But so I've always been a Jonah Hill fan, so to see him at this point in his journey is very awesome. I go all the way back to, Superbad. Before that, Accepted, just all these different movies and stuff. He's always been great. Let's see. So yeah, the mini-sode did not come out on Thanksgiving because I was just running a little bit behind. But I'm definitely, if you're listening to this one, the other one, the most recent Bite-Sized Bio is also available, number 8 on Benjamin Franklin. I also mentioned some stuff on there about birthdays. So it's definitely, I was going to put it out later, but I was like, this actually goes, it's just, I have to put it out now because I mentioned things about a previous episode that would just be pointless. We're getting too inside baseball here. But what we learned a lot about Benjamin Franklin, we learned that maybe he didn't invent all those inventions that are attributed to his name, but what is also we learn, which is really cool, is that he signed all the important documents that solidified America's freedom. So we can kind of let him slide on things like Poor Richard's Almanac and maybe whether or not he actually was the first guy to create flippers or fins or whatever. But yeah, I don't think there's that much more to talk about. I do want to say there is a brief mention of violence later on in the podcast. We talk about some things that maybe if you have kids in the car or if you yourself are a little bit squeamish that you may want to skip over or just not listen to. I just didn't want to say that, do this without giving a trigger warning out there. Much more to mention before we get going here. As always, like and subscribe. Anywhere you see the old HDTH symbol, leave a review and I'll read it on the pod. I know you guys probably don't care, but that's cool. If you don't want to review and want to keep listening, that's also cool as well. I don't think I have much more to cover. Yep, let's learn about some voodoo. Okay, so we are going to start with the beginning of voodoo / voodoo in Africa. So voodoo, it means spirit, and it may be one of the world's oldest ancestral nature-honoring traditions out there, basically. They say it could be at least maybe 6,000 years old. And the African elements of their religious practice are derived mainly from this place called Dahomey, which used to be called Benin, right? It's in West Africa, and also from a place called Yoruba, Fon, and the Iwi people. I'm not sure. You guys know I'm definitely going to get all these names wrong, but they come from West Africa and the Congo people of Central Africa. And in that area, it's actually called Vodun, right? It's not, the voodoo part comes in later when it comes over to the western parts of the world, but the actual ancient religion itself is called Vodun. And basically, once it starts from Africa and gets all the way down to basically New Orleans and Louisiana, it kind of just continually gets watered down, if you will. And in my opinion, this is not, I guess, a widely held opinion, or people don't describe it this way, but it's like it just continues to get passed on, and things, they don't always maintain the same integrity, I guess, as they get passed on. So let's see. So the first recorded actual written excuse me, how can I put this? The first time that they have actually the word Vodun written down is in 1658 in the Doctrina Christiana, and it's a Fawn word. With Voodoo overall, a lot of the words, they originated in West Africa, so that they will have these West African roots even when you get all the way to Louisiana. Sorcerers called Botano, they can be summoned to put a hex on somebody, or sometimes called Bo, I guess. And they use the malevolent power of the voodoo spirit. Now, there's a lot of different parts to this, and I don't want to get people confused. What I'm really going to try to do is kind of lay out the African origins of voodoo, like the West African origins of that, and then kind of explain what voodoo is, and then also explain how it got from basically Africa to basically the Americas. I'm not gonna lay it out and run it all the way up through to 20th century voodoo, because that's not really what this podcast is. But it's really about just how we got this old 6,000-year-old religion from Africa called Vodun, and get it all the way to basically Haiti and then to Louisiana, and it becomes voodoo. That's the whole point of this. And so voodoo is it's considered one of the many African diaspora religions, which is something that's actually, there's a lot of them besides just voodoo. But it means that they're basically religions that came over to the Americas, and they originated possibly in Africa, and then either merged with or took the place of other Western religions. And that's actually what voodoo did when it came over to the Americas. It basically kind of merged with Roman Catholicism, which is something that I did not know before looking into voodoo at all. I didn't realize that there were so many overlapping principles between voodoo and even Christianity overall. And if you look at a lot of these different pictures of like voodoo rituals, or like the shrines they built up, there's usually a cross. If you see, which is, now that I know, you see it everywhere. But I never thought about that. And so there are many elements of African spirituality that continue to exist in modern voodoo, and as far as their practices, the transcendental drumming, the dancing, the worship of the ancestral dead, which is a large part of it, and then they also worship these spirits that are called Iwa, and I believe that's how you pronounce it. But we're going to move on to the Iwas now. And so Iwa, or I think maybe Loa. I don't know. Let me see if I can find that real fast. Google break. Taking a break to Google. Google break. Taking a break to Google. Okay, and that's why we do this. That's why we're always trying to get the facts straight here. I looked it up, and it turns out it actually is Loa. I've been pronouncing it this entire time through my research as Iwa. I think Iwa sounds pretty cool, but you always want to get it right, so they're going to be called Loas from here on out. So Loas are thought to be invisible supernatural beings that serve as intermediaries between humans and the supreme creator God, known in the Haitian Creole circle as Bandai, probably, or Bandu, meaning good God. And so that's where you see they also, like I said, they continue to intertwine these two religions. In voodoo, they're still considered to be monotheistic, so they do have one God. They just look at it differently than we do. The Loa are divided into two types of spirits. Well, actually, more than two. There's around like 17 different types, but there are two main types, and these divisions are called Nanchons, which translates to nations, right? And this is actually pretty interesting because they were created when the original West Africans were brought to Haiti, right? They were separated during that time by their port of origin, aka their nation, right? And so they're the two specific ones that I'll cover really fast. Is the Rada, which is considered to be the good spirit, and the Rada derive their name from Arada, which is a city in the Dahomey Kingdom. Like I said, all this stuff goes back to West Africa. So you see, no matter how far you get from the origin, a lot of it still uses the exact same language that it had from the beginning. So the Rada Loa are regarded as the sweet-tempered type of actual spirit. And then there's the Petwa, which is the bad and volatile type of spirit. And so the Petwa Loa, they're conversely seen as indicating that they can be forceful, violent. They're usually associated with fire. They are generally regarded as being socially transgressive and subversive. And so that's just kind of explains, because like I said, the Loa are basically their version of angels, if you will. They tried to make it, to try to keep it in the parallel path of Christianity. And so they have a bunch of different types, and it's not the same. So I'm not saying that Loa are angels. I'm just saying if you were to look at them, try to have some sort of like comparison, they would probably be the closest thing. And so actually, during the rituals that they do, they'll make offerings to the Loa, and then some of the offerings can include things like fruit, liquor, or even sacrificed animals. And like I said, there are actually other Loas, which I'll read off to you a couple before we move on. Like I said, there's at least maybe 17, but I'm going to give you like 3, and then we'll bounce on to the next part of this. Keep learning about this voodoo. So we have Agwe, who like their main domain is aquatic life. And so, like I said, or I don't know if I said this before. I don't know if I have. I think I said that the Loas are a lot like angels, but they're also can be equated with some actual Catholic saints. And so I'm not going to like draw the actual connections for all these, but like this, in the same way that you think about Catholic saints having certain specialties, these Loas kind of work in the same way. So like I said, Agwe is aquatic life. You have Izili Freda, which she's about love and luxury. There's Loco, he's about vegetation and healing. And then there's actually, I guess, the most like supreme of all these people that I'm about to mention. I don't think he goes in the same realm, but it's this guy named Papa Legba, right? He's considered the voodoo equivalent of Saint Peter. And this is because St. Peter is usually depicted carrying keys, and in voodoo, Legba is seen as the key to the spirit world. So like I said, there are so many overlapping principles between voodoo and Christianity that I'm only becoming privy to now. He usually appears as an old man on a crutch or with a cane, wearing a broad-brimmed straw hat, smoking a pipe, or drinking dark rum. This guy sounds like a good time. And one of the things people argue, and I think this actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it, as to why there are so many overlapping principles between the two religions, is that when the Africans were brought over to the West, a lot of them were basically prevented from practicing their own religion. So what they would do is take their own religion and kind of like sew it into the Roman Catholic ideologies, so that they could basically kind of wink and a nod and say, okay, this guy, St. Peter, he's our guy. But in reality, they're really thinking about what's that guy, Papa Legba? Yeah, so basically they're thinking of him when they're mentioning St. Peter, which is how you end up with, after hundreds of years, and basically being intertwined. And so voodoo teaches us that there are over 1,000 Loas. But like I said, there are multiple different types, and then there are other Loas in between that. I don't know if I'm making any sense to anybody, but like I said, they are regarded as the intermediaries to Bondi, and as having wisdom that is useful for humans, although they are not seen as moral exemplars which practitioners should imitate, meaning like they're not like how, it's almost the same way in Christianity as well. They're not what you should aspire to be. They just help you get closer to God. Is basically the same way that these Loas work as actual angels work in Christianity. So voodooists believe that the Loa communicate with humans through dreams and also through the possession of human beings themselves. And feeding the Loa is a big thing. It's of great importance. And like I mentioned earlier, they have these rites and these rituals where they offer food and drink to the Loa. And they're usually done communally, and they can also be done in the home. And the choice of food and drink offered actually varies depending on the Loa themselves, which is interesting. I don't actually have a list of the different ones. But they say for one specific, there's one called Danbala, and he only likes white foods, especially eggs. Sounds like some people that I know, and I don't mean like a racist thing. I just mean like there's some people that only like foods of certain color. They're weird like that. No offense, I'm not calling people weird. I'm not judging you, but I guess I'm a little bit judging you. I don't know. Like the foods offered to Legba, right? The Papa Legba guy we mentioned, no matter what it is, got to be grilled, right? So it's like this stuff's kind of wild when you think about it. These people seem to have real personalities, if you will. And so we'll move on from the Loas to the actual voodoo beliefs. What does it mean when you do that voodoo that you do? And so a voodoo temple is called an unfo, right? A hunfo, or sometimes a hunfort. And that's where everybody comes to do their voodoo. And those who practice voodoo are sometimes called, as I mentioned earlier, voodooists, voodoozients, or servitors. A lot of this does get mixed up with French as well, as we see as it comes over from the West Africans to Haiti, because we'll get into it a little bit later, but Haiti was a French colony, and it was actually like one of the richest French colonies that ever existed. Let's see. So teaching the existence of a single supreme God. Like I said, voodoo has been described as monotheistic, believed to have their God was believed to have created the universe and made man, I think, out of clay, something like that. I may be conflating the two. But their god Bondu is seen as the ultimate source of power and deemed responsible for maintaining the universal order. That's a lot. to put on one entity. But I suppose God, and that's what's interesting about all, like, when you look at all religions, not all religions, that's a lie, take that back. When you look at a lot of monotheistic religions who focus on one kind of all-knowing and supreme God, it's hard not to find similarities between, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and just to think that we all came from one singular place. And so for us all to have a lot of these similar ideas, I don't know, one of us has got to be right? Wouldn't that be wild if just none of us knew? Let's see. Haitians will frequently use the phrase "si bon Dieu veut," which means if bon Dieu wishes. No, guys, I took Spanish and not French, so just like bear with me. Let's see how much more can I mention about what voodoo really is. Voodoo's nocturnal gatherings are often called dance, which just means dance, and they reflect the prominent role that dancing has in such ceremonies. Their purpose is to invite the Loa to enter the ritual space and possess one of the worshippers. So like I was saying, we talked about these Loas, right? So they have these nighttime dances where they're hoping to bring the Loas in, let the Loa take over somebody, and then they hope that they can communicate with the congregation by doing so. That's what it is, I guess, to do that voodoo that you do. I know I keep saying it, but I mean that's what I I don't know anything about voodoo. I'm learning about it just like you guys are. So I'm just it's also there's a lot going on. Let's see. So is there any more I can tell you about the voodoo? They say sometimes these dances take all night. That just seems like a lot. But they do. I mean, I guess you gotta dance it out to get that Loa to show up. But yeah, so we're gonna move on from there. So that was about voodoo. Now I'm gonna tell you how voodoo got to Haiti. And to me, that is one of the more interesting parts of this entire process. I looked a lot to find out about voodoo in Africa, and there's definitely a lot more. And this may end up being, I don't see it being a part 2 right now, but I think I can see myself going back and adding to this, because there's so much information that I was only able to kind of pull certain little excerpts from this entire, religion itself, because that's what I realized when I started doing it. I thought, honestly, in my heart of hearts, and being honest with you, the listeners, we've been in this for 51 episodes now. I thought this was just like some sort of like, I don't know, like some sort of demonic one-off. I don't know, just like something, voodoo dolls and whatever. And we're going to get to voodoo dolls too, but it's actually a religion. And I didn't know that. So that's why when I really dove into it, I was like, there's a lot here. So said all that to say, here we are, voodoo in Haiti. So the ritual language used in voodoo is called langage. I don't know why that's important, but many of these terms, like I said, actually derive themselves from the Fon language of West Africa. And this is, like I said before, it was called Vodun, right? And now it's called voodoo, as far as when it comes to from West Africa to Haiti, right around the 1500s. And so the first West African slaves that were brought to Haiti from West Africa, this was in 1512. And this was because when the Spanish first arrived in Haiti, they killed off all the natives, so they had to find somebody else to work the fields. The conditions in Haiti were different than other slave settlements, as far as like the temperate deciduous forests of North America. They had disease and climate that also made it very hard for the slaves to work and get anything done. A lot of the slaves would die from yellow fever or malaria, and this meant that there was a high turnover rate among the slaves. And I think this is actually one of the more important aspects or parts of, I would say, when you think about the idea of just the slave trade in general, but also is very important in the advancement of voodoo throughout the Americas. But so this meant basically that the slave owners did not care enough for their actual slaves, because they knew that the guys they brought in were more than likely going to be dead within a year of them having shown up. And so this forced them to try to get as much work out of them as possible before those guys would actually succumb to disease, which means they're working them like they're not going to have a life to live. So you don't care about that person's well-being. I mean, obviously you wouldn't as a slave trader at all, but I mean, if you think about it, like I say, for example, right? Let's say you have a slave in the South who may live and work for 20 years, right? During that time, they grow, right, and they learn the ways of their new home. They're in a whole new world, a completely different country, right? They may have a kid, they may marry. They're still a slave during all this, but they create new American-like traditions that really is what you see as far as the slaves in North America, right? So that slave, he is not the African slave that he was, and he's creating more slaves that are not like what he was. But what you have here in Haiti is because there's such a large turnover, And because these slaves were treated so horribly and they died so fast, the only culture they were able to hold on to was the African one they came in with, which is, like I said, a unique perspective when you think about slaves in the Americas. Like basically every year you had just a whole nother crop of African dudes. You weren't building on anything like they were in other settlements. And so this coupled with their numbers, it really helps to explain why revolution at that time was so possible, if not just ripe, just for the happening. And so what another part that I think plays is important is that in 1685 the French king Louis the 14th, I'm going to say the 14th. Let's look at that. I think that's the 14th, right? He passed the Code Noir, right? It just sounds cool. It's not cool, but it sounds cool. It was a decree that dictated the lawful conditions that were applied to slaves and slaveholders across the French colonial empire, and this was supposed to slow down some of the abuse that we were talking about that was suffered by the slaves at the hand of the French slave owners, but it was mostly ignored. Mostly which was, let's be honest, most laws about slaves during that time were ignored. I mean, because when you think about the fact that I think that the North Atlantic slave trade had been outlawed for 20 or 30 years before it actually ever actually stopped. You know what I mean? And like even like Juneteenth with the Emancipation Proclamation, the slaves in Texas didn't find out till 2 years after it was written. It's like people. I mean, that was a little bit of time, but it's like I don't know. A lot of laws just kind of were just about slaves were kind of just passed over as far as like anybody actually caring. But so we get from there to talk about they basically the slave owners were outnumbered by the slaves. I mean the numbers are ridiculous. I mean by 1681 there were more than 10 times the amount of slaves in Haiti compared to the European settlers. And in 1789 the colony's population went as such. It was 40,000 white guys, right? 28,000 free black people, which is something specific to the French colonies. Actually, you find they always have this little. There's like a 3-tiered class structure that actually ends up in a lot of the French colonies, and there's usually in the middle of the whites and the enslaved blacks. There's a little crust of like free black people, which I guess existed in America during that time, but it was also it's very much like mentioned and specific in these French colonies. So you had 40,000 white guys, you had 28,000 free blacks and mulattoes, right? Then you had 450,000 slaves. It's like when you look at that number and think about the fact that you're also on an island, which is very different than being in Tennessee somewhere. It's like it was just primed to happen. And so now we come to the Haitian Revolution, which I mentioned. I'm going to say this beforehand because I'm going to tell you a brief story about like how it all went down, because I think it's really important in history, but it's also important in the scheme of things as far as how voodoo continued to spread throughout America. And I'll just give you the kind of won't bury the lead beforehand. This is what makes people leave because of the Haitian Revolution and flee to New Orleans, which is what makes New Orleans the voodoo capital of North America, if you will. So I'm saying that just to explain why I feel like this story is necessary. So, the Haitian Revolution. On the night of the 14th of August, 1791, as the story goes, slaves from a few neighboring plantations, right, they left their homes to meet deep in the forest of a bunch of French words. I'm about to mess all this up, guys. Just believe that, right? So they were in a French colony, which was Haiti, right? And they gathered around a bonfire, and Mambo Cecile Fatiman, right, he presided over the ceremony. And basically, they prophesized that a revolution was coming. Right, this lady said that 3 people would lead it. A man named Jean Francois, such a cool name. I mean, I was going back. Could I just be named Jean Francois? It just rolls off the tongue. A guy named Georges Biassou and Jeannin Boulet. Right, those 3 guys were going to lead this revolution. And so they slit the throat of a black Creole pig, and they handed around that pig's blood, and everybody just took a swig. They made a solemn oath to destroy their oppressors, and boy, did they. So, according to the folklore, these clouds showed up around the same time and everything got pretty wild, and somebody got possessed. What they say for people who don't follow voodoo is that there was a tropical storm just came through during that time. So whatever you want to believe, right? Whatever you want to believe. But so you basically get one of the biggest, I guess the biggest and most successful slave revolt in, I would say, at least history. We don't know as far, we talked about slaves a couple episodes ago. Who knows what like the Egyptian ones, what they went through, because they were the first ones to actually strike, but that's a whole different story. So this is the largest one as far as the North Atlantic slave trade is involved. And so basically these slaves sought revenge on their masters through pillage, rape, torture, mutilation, and death, all that. And the long years of oppression by the planters, all the bad stuff that they had done to them. And they really had a large hatred for all these people. And it was very violent to begin with, which you would just imagine that it would. The masters and mistresses were dragged from their beds, killed. The heads of French children were placed on pikes and were carried at the front of the rebel columns. So if you can just imagine, they're just coming through these little towns with just the heads of children just put on pikes, which we covered the pikes in I believe, I forget what episode, but it's just a long stick with a point at the end. And the planters had long feared such a revolt and were well armed when this happened. But within weeks, the number of slaves who joined the revolt, it was north of six figures, and it just got, like I said, we're talking 500,000 people enslaved on an island by 40,000 people. Like, it's just, when you look at the numbers like that, you can, and I mean, hindsight's 2020. You're like, this would not end well, and it didn't for the slaveholders. Within the next 2 months, as the violence escalated, the slaves killed 4,000 whites and burned or destroyed 180 sugar plantations and hundreds of coffee and indigo plantations. And so I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but I did mention that Haiti was like the richest French colony that basically ever existed, and their main source of profit was from exporting sugar. Basically, I think they said somewhere like half of the world's sugar was coming from Haiti during that time or something like that. So they destroyed all of that stuff, and at least 900 coffee plantations. Would cost them, I think, $2 million total. I think France, once it was all said and done. Let's see, the surviving slaveholders, they organized into militias. Then they fought back, and they killed about 15,000 blacks. Long story short, without getting into the entire history of the Haitian Revolution, I mean, they basically kind of won, and they got, Haiti was declared. They were all declared free, and that's actually something that I think is really interesting when you actually think about the mindset of these slaveholders, because what had happened was before they actually did the revolution, there had been a decree that had been put out by the French king that was basically saying that all of these slaves that were basically that every man was free. It was kind of the same thing that they did in America, except we all kind of did the wink and a nod, like we know that every man is free. And they did the same thing, but these black guys in Haiti kind of took it seriously and thought when they were actually doing all this, when they were up during the uprising, they thought they were fighting for the actual French crown and doing what they should do as far as fighting for independence. That's a very wild way to look at. There's so many different, like they said, two things can be true, and there's three sides to every bit of truth, and I think that's just another piece of it. But like I said, this would also, all of this would be the reason is responsible for bringing voodoo to the United States. Right, so over the course of those years, I think it was 13 years actually at the entire revolution, a lot of white slave owner planters, they left Haiti and then went to Louisiana, and the slaves that they brought their traditions and beliefs in tow as well. And that is how we kind of get Louisiana to be, as I said earlier, the voodoo capital of North America.
With Miller Mott College's online programs, you can choose when you study. Our online programs give you the flexibility to make education work with your schedule. Earn your degree without derailing your life. Visit us online at miller-mott.edu. That's miller-mott.edu.
And so we don't have much more to cover. Basically, all I'm going to tell you about are voodoo dolls, and then we're going to talk a little bit about voodoo in North America. Like I said, to me, that's when it becomes, people can do podcasts about voodoo all day long. I just thought I really wanted to know how it got here. How did we get to New Orleans being what it is? Not what is New Orleans or any of that stuff. So we'll get to voodoo dolls, which actually come from a doll in West Africa called a Bochio doll, and depending on the spelling, it's either Boccio or Bochio. And Bochio, it means it's an empowered figure or an empowered cadaver, because there's a lot of different parts to this, but basically, like, they would kind of empower these little small dolls, and then they would be important as far as to the family. Then they would consider to be maybe even like having like sort of quote unquote magic powers without saying that. We're not talking about Harry Potter or anything, but I have a quote here from a really good article that I will put up on the works cited, but it says a person might purchase one of these small carvings for any number of reasons, from the mundane to the profound. A believer in Voodoo seeks out these objects and then consults a priest who will empower or energize them, transforming their appearance as well as their importance. So the Bochio can have many layers of incrustation from sacrificial liquids and many different types of magical attachments. depending on their intended function, end quote. So that's kind of just explaining what these Bochio dolls, how their origin really, and where they come from, and why they exist. And they're much larger than just being a voodoo doll, although there is a voodoo aspect of it. And so they would have like pegs you could put into certain parts of their body, their face or their arms or what have you. And it is kind of, you are kind of we are wishing something on someone. But I also read an article that made a really interesting point to say this is one of the first kind of psychotherapeutic like devices to exist in the whole world, where it's like you're transferring your stress onto another object, which is then like, helping you de-stress when you think about it. And it may have like sinister like kind of origins or fundamentals, if you will, but it's really the idea of you trying to just get this idea off your chest, which is helping you de-stress, which is kind of like a therapy. So I just thought that was an interesting thing. But that is where the voodoo dolls come from. They basically kind of morph into what we have now. And I think it's something, what do they say? Once the Africans were brought to America as slaves, they were forbidden from carving dolls out of wood. And I didn't mention before, the Bochio, usually the Bochio dolls were made out of wood, right? And this is what led them to kind of make them out of cloth and led to the actual voodoo dolls that we know of today. So beforehand, they were actually wood, but because they were forbidden doing that when they came over to America, they had to kind of change up and do something different. Let's see. So the last little bit before we move on to the regular segments of HDTH is going to be Voodoo in America, which I basically almost covered, so I'm not going to say too much about it. As I said, the Haitian Revolution is what led people to leave Haiti and come over to New Orleans in search of not being revolutionized, if you will. And they brought their slaves, and those guys were like, we do voodoo. You guys want to know about voodoo? I mean, voodoo was already there a little bit, so I'm not trying to say like the Haitian Revolution is like the sole reason why voodoo was in New Orleans, but it is a large part, a very large part. In 1809 alone, more than 10,000 people came from modern day Haiti to New Orleans. I mean, they're definitely bringing their beliefs. And so the core belief of New Orleans voodoo is that one God does not interfere in daily lives, but that spirits do. And those will kind of also be the lowest spirits that we're talking about. A connection with these spirits can be obtained through various rituals such as dance, music, chanting, and even snakes. And we talked about this as well. It's like their dance they would do at night, sometimes all night, so that someone could actually catch the spirit and let them possess them, if you will. And so they have a person called a voodoo queen, who is not sure how you would equate that to any sort of religion, like I was doing earlier. But this woman's name is Marie Laveau, and she lived during from 1794 to 1881, and she was basically very, very heavy in the voodoo community. She was also a hairdresser. She lived in the French Quarter on St. Anne Street, and basically people would come and ask for her help. And she was even noted, a lot of people who escaped slavery around there said that it was because she gave them some sort of like spell or put a good curse on them or something, that would allow them to leave. And she was even well known with, among the politicians and lawyers and businessmen of that day. There's an odd story which I have not actually fact checked, but I think I heard this on a documentary that said that she's the reason why they stopped public executions in Louisiana, because I guess in 1852 there were these two guys who were convicted of murder and they were about to be hung. And when basically before all that, she had come out to their cells multiple times during while they were on death row and talked to them. And the day that they finally went to be hung, some crazy magic happened, and both their nooses just popped off their neck, and like the storm, like the clouds came out, and everything was like, oh no, we're not doing this. And so I would love to look that up. And if someone wants to look it up and tell me if it's true, that's cool. I may do it sometime. I may look it up and tell you about it on the mini episode next week. But yeah, she died in 1881. And I believe that is about all I have to say about voodoo. And that is how voodoo happened. And now it's time for the roundup. And we're going to round it up. Voodoo, originally known as Vodun, has been around for about 6,000 years. It came over from Africa during the African slave trade. It came to America partially through the Haitian slave uprising of 1791. Things I didn't know before. And now I know them. Never heard of these things. What are they? All right, so for the things I didn't know before, I really only have one. I didn't know anything about voodoo before. So what I will say, I guess, in addition to the one thing that I didn't know before, I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is that I did not know that voodoo was so old and that it came from Africa as well. I didn't. I really probably, like maybe some of you thought, okay, it probably just originated somewhere on some alley in New Orleans, or I'm just uneducated in that respect, which is both are not true. One is true. I didn't know anything about voodoo. So that was definitely something that I will probably continue to want to look into it, because there's just so much more that I feel like I need to know. So the one thing I did not know before is that in New Orleans, they call their cemeteries cities of the dead. Cities of the dead. And it is literally because they have streets in those cemeteries, and they're just so big. And I've been to some big cemeteries before, but I don't know if they had street names. Maybe they did, because I live in Richmond, so we have this thing here called the Hollywood Cemetery, which is a huge cemetery. And it's got a lot of the Confederate soldiers from the war. It's got I think 1 or 2 dead presidents. Definitely, I think the Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, he's buried there. And there's streets and stuff. I just never noticed if they actually have street signs. But yeah, so they call them cities of the dead in New Orleans. And I've always thought that everything about the NO is always just so unique. I've never been. I'd love to go sometime. But yeah, that's all I got for things I didn't know before. All right, that's been another episode of How Did That Happen? Hope you guys all enjoyed it. HDTH. Hope you guys will head over to hdthappen.com for all the extras. See all the different videos and pictures that I'll post, along with the transcript of this actual episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you leave a review, I will read it on the pod. Be sure to hit up the Twitter page, where I post things about HDTH as well as just history and life in general. As always, I appreciate you guys pressing play, and we'll see you in a few days with the next mini episode.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Okay, round 2. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.